In light of what's happened in Orlando, I thought we'd start with talking about terrorism and safety and security. People are looking for someone with answers because this is unfathomable almost. What are your answers? How do we stop this sort of thing from happening?
Yeah. Well, it's such a terrible tragedy, and my heart and my prayers goes out to the families of the victims. But I think that we live in a new security environment. I think we live in a world where we need to recognize that we need additional security measures. We need leadership that recognizes that we have a real enemy, a determined enemy that wants to cause, wants to kill, wants to murder American citizens. And I think that the current administration, the current Congress, has really largely been feckless in their efforts against ISIS here. I mean, we know that the FBI interviewed this suspect on 2 occasions, and yet really nothing was done to bring him in or to interdict. And so we need to get a lot more serious about that, and we need to make sure that if we've identified someone who's an ISIS supporter, I think that we need to take even stronger action than we've done in the past.
And what else? I mean, give me more specifics. I mean, how you said we need tighter, stronger measures. What else are you looking for?
Well, specifically, if someone has been interviewed by the FBI, identified as an ISIS supporter, I think that we need additional interrogation. We need to possibly give law enforcement the ability to detain. We also need to recognize that it's more important than ever that people be able to defend themselves. This was a soft target. There was no one at this location who was able to defend themselves or was able to stop this perpetrator. And so, a lot of people today are talking about guns, about gun violence. This is not about gun violence. This is about terrorism. And the fact of the matter is that this terrorist walked into this location. He had a suicide vest on. He easily could have used a suicide vest as well. So I think that what we need to remember too is that the American people are the first and best line of defense against terror. In addition to that, we need to take a closer look at who's coming into this country. I recognize that this was a U.S. citizen in this case, but we also need to look very closely at immigration and the policies there. We have people coming into the country from dangerous nations like Afghanistan and Syria. We don't really have an adequate vetting process, I think, in place right now, and we need to get serious about this. This is something that is not going to go away. These kinds of attacks have been threatened by ISIS on more than once. We know they're coming. And we, as a country, as a people, need to recognize that threat and need to take appropriate actions to deal with it.
So to follow up on what you just said, are you supporting a ban on Muslims entering the country?
I'm not supporting a religious litmus test for people to come into the country, no. But what I am saying is that we need to get serious about countries that we know have people in them where ISIS is active, where Al Qaeda is active, places like Syria, places like Iraq, places like Afghanistan, and we need to look much more closely at who is coming into this country and who is in this country right now.
Would you ban Syrian refugees from entering?
Like I said, I want a vetting process, and right now we don't have one. Okay. So the fact that we are taking in hundreds of Syrian refugees right now, to me, is a concern, because just look at what happened in Paris. ISIS utilized porous borders in the EU to get attackers into Paris, and they were some of the ones who actually participated in the attacks at the Bataclan nightclub. This attack in Orlando is our Bataclan.
So you talked about guns. You're saying that more guns is the answer.
I'm saying that a prepared public, a public that is capable of defending itself, is a critical element of defending our communities. And right now, in Dutchess County, where I live, for example, there are 43,000 concealed carry permit holders. Dutchess County is a wonderful place to live, a very safe place to live. And I think that having someone who is trained, having someone who knows how to use a firearm, who's in an environment where there is an attacker, is something that could save a lot of lives.
And you're talking about just average citizens carrying?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about assault weapons? Do you think they have a purpose? Do you think they should not be banned?
Well, again, we're talking about assault weapons because of this latest attack. But at the same time, this attacker was wearing a suicide vest. He didn't need to use an assault weapon. This is not about the guns. This is not about, we should not be looking at law-abiding citizens right now as we're dealing with an attack from ISIS. This is part of the problem, is that the Democrats and this administration have failed us. They have let us down. And now what they want to do is they want to divert attention to the issue, this Second Amendment issue, which is a fundamental right for the American people, when in fact what this is a failing of their administration to secure the country, to provide security for us. And so to me, it's not an issue of guns. This is an issue of terror.
Okay, let's move on to the economy, because
Sure.
I think we can probably agree that people in the district care more about that than anything else. They
Yep.
care about their livelihood and their pocketbook. What's your number one answer to make their economic life better?
Right. Well, 70% of the jobs in this district come from small business, and that's who I am. I come from small business. I grew up in a small business family, and I run a small business here in the district. And right now we are dealing with an economy where there's never been a more hostile environment for small business in the United States, and that is very clear in the 19th district. And the 19th district is a very big district, very diverse. Some areas are doing better than others, but really what we need to do is we need to rebuild from the ground up. So what that's going to take is tax reform, tax simplification. We need to put small businesses on an even playing field with large corporations. We need regulatory reform in the form of Obamacare. I talk to businesses all across the district who tell me that they're not hiring because of regulations like Obamacare. That's a really big problem. And we also need, what we need too is something that is immediate. We need a congressman who's going to be a salesman for this district, someone who's going to go out and who's literally going to ask businesses to come in and work inside the district, who's going to work on economic development, partner with some of our colleges and universities to try to provide a workforce in the district. So I think a lot of congressmen or potential congressmen wouldn't see that as something that is their job. I would see it as my job. That's something that I've done myself. I've been involved in sales my whole life as a small business owner, and I'd like to apply those skills to the 19th district.
It sounds good. I mean, in theory, but we've seen the current administration spend $40 million and create 76 jobs trying to lure businesses here. Can it really be done?
I think it can. I think that the problem with New York State is we have a government in Albany that is really fundamentally corrupt. It is as you said, $40 million spent for 76 jobs. And what was that $40 million spent for? It was spent to make one politician look better. That's why people have lost faith in this system. I mean, they know that government is not there to help them. And so I really do think it can be done. I mean, I think that we need leadership out of our congressmen, and I think that if we've got to start somewhere, and even if this is a hostile environment, New York is one of the worst places to do business in the United States. We need someone to go out and ask people to come in here and start companies and bring their businesses here and create jobs in the district.
Do you offer tax cuts to them? Do you offer tax cuts to the general population?
I think one of the things I learned as a kid, one of my first jobs was working as a door-to-door salesman for my dad's heating oil company. And one of the things I learned was that, even if it looks like you're not going to get a sale, you still have to ask for the sale. It's just part of the ethos of, being a good salesman. New York State is a place where people almost have to make a non-economic decision about locating their business here. So we have to find other reasons for them to locate here. We have enormous advantages, enormous assets in this district. Beautiful, just an incredible environment, beautiful cities and towns. We have wonderful educational institutions. There are a number of great reasons to locate here. We need to identify those, and we need to ask for the sale. We need to ask people to come here and work here. Okay,
and as far as families and the general public go, do you advocate tax cuts for them?
Absolutely. I mean, right now, the tax code in the United States is an abomination. It's a 70,000-page monstrosity that's been written line by lobbyists and career politicians on behalf of their clients. And, who's getting hurt? The middle class. It's choking the life out of our economy. And the people of New York, there's no one in the United States who needs tax relief more than the people of New York. And I think that, as a congressman, I would fight very hard to provide tax relief for them. Okay.
You mentioned Obamacare. Is that, we hear a lot of Republican candidates say, my first day in office, I'm going to work to repeal Obamacare. Are you on that train?
Yeah, I absolutely am. I could tell you story after story about people, not only businesses who aren't hiring, But people whose lives have been really damaged by this law have lost their health care right in the middle of a health crisis. People who have been fined thousands of dollars because they didn't sign up for the program, at the right time. This was a law that we were told was going to allow us to keep our doctors. It was going to keep healthcare costs down. It's done the opposite of all of those things. We need to start at square one. We need to get back to some market-based reforms and market-based systems where we can provide good health care to our families, but we've got to get rid of Obamacare. It is absolutely destroying, I know personally, several small businesses I've spoken to have told me that, it's really just, it's damaged the connection between them and their employees, and they're just not hiring because of it.
But what about those who couldn't get insurance before? Do you leave them behind? How do they get helped?
No, listen, I mean, even before Obamacare, there were programs in place to provide health care to families that could not get insurance or who were uninsured. No, you don't leave them behind. What we need to do is we need to work, what I would have done if we could go back is create, state-based high-risk pools for the uninsurable, people who were not able to get health care before. The federal government could have come in there and backstopped that and provided, support for that and made that affordable. And people who don't have insurance, there were already a number of government programs for them to do that as well. Obamacare was, in my mind, written for and by special interests on behalf of the healthcare industry. And it has been a fantastically expensive experiment that has failed miserably, and we've got to start over.
And one of the biggest concerns a lot of people have when it comes to health care, when you talk to the average rank and file person out in the street, is that rising cost of prescription drugs. How do you combat that?
Well, one of the things we need to do is we need to be able to allow people to pool their buying. Right now, there are several laws that prevent that, and we should be able to negotiate with the pharma companies on some of the most commonly prescribed pills. And for example, one of the things that I would like to see, I'd like to see small businesses or groups or even associations be able to purchase collectively on a co-op model and be able to drive the cost of those pills down. Okay,
and we're talking about costs, and I'll go back to more of an economic issue here, but the minimum wage. You've seen what's happened here in New York State. What do you think about a federal minimum wage increase?
Look, I want higher wages for everybody. And unfortunately, over the last 7 years, we've suffered under an administration and a Congress that has not been able to deliver wage growth. We've had absolutely no wage growth whatsoever in this economy. It's a disaster. So now the solution, I guess, is to wave a magic wand and declare it to be $15 across the board. And one of the on the day that bill passed the New York State Senate, I went out and visited a small business, and that very same day, that small business, it was a seasonal business that hires a lot of children or kids in the summertime to run a tourist attraction. And he had just let go of his accountant or his bookkeeper that he had had for the last 15 years. In order to pay for the extra money that it's going to cost to pay those seasonal workers. So that was the first, the casualty of that bill that I had heard of. And what I want to see is I want to see higher wage growth that is driven by a stronger economy. The only way you get higher wages is if company A is competing with company B for the same worker, and that's where we've got to go.
You're running in a primary. You're both Republicans.
Yep.
You're giving me what are typical Republican answers. Do you think you differ that much from your opponent? Do you think he has basically the same answers? What makes you different?
Yeah, I think we are fundamentally different. I come from a small business background. I've never run for office before. My opponent is a career politician. He's run for office 11 times. He spent over 30 years in Albany, and he spent the last 10 years as a lobbyist. This is someone who is part of the problem. I'm running because I believe the system is broken, fundamentally broken. He's running because he's looking for another job. And the people are just disgusted with this system. And the last person they want is someone who has learned the lessons of Albany, who has spent the last 10 years as a lobbyist. We need to rebuild people's faith in the government. And the question that people have to ask themselves is, who is best suited to do that? Is it someone who's a small business owner from outside of politics, or is it an Albany insider?
This kind of segues into the commercials, the TV ads. There's been a lot of negativity. One of your contentions is that he's a lobbyist, and that has an evil connotation to it in your ad, and maybe within the general public as well. But let me ask a couple of specifics about the ads. There's back and forth between you two about who's donated money to President Obama. Have you given money to President Obama?
I did in an effort to stop Hillary Clinton. I am no fan of Hillary Clinton. I don't think she's fit to be president. Didn't think it then, didn't think it now. So my contribution was during his primary against Hillary Clinton. I supported John McCain 100% in that election. And so I think what that emphasizes is just how fundamentally dishonest my opponent has been in his campaign. And that, by the way, that donation has been mischaracterized primarily by his super PAC. And he had a single billionaire donor put over $600,000 into those negative and dishonest attacks. And so again, I think that people have a decision to make. Do they want someone who would take a donation from a single individual, a single billionaire, to attack their opponent dishonestly? Or would they, would they like to have someone who has never run for office before, who's a small business owner?
He claims that he hasn't given money to President Obama, yet ads for you intimate that he has.
Yeah.
Do you really believe that he's given money to President Obama?
I don't believe it. I know it. It's a matter of public record. John Faso is a lobbyist, and he worked for a Democrat lobbying firm, and they had a super PAC called the Golden State PAC, and it gave money to Democrats, something that John Faso knew. And John Faso gave to that super PAC religiously, almost $6,000 to that super PAC. And that super PAC's dollars went to Barack Obama, it went to Nancy Pelosi, it went to Harry Reid, it went to Dianne Feinstein. So John Faso just figures that the public can't figure that out. And so what he'll do is he'll just deny, deny, deny. And that's the typical thing that politicians do. And that's why people have no faith in the system, is that politicians are literally willing. What I've learned about my opponent is he's literally willing to deny things that are absolute public fact. And one of the things that he's denied, which is unbelievable, is his involvement in one of the biggest pay-to-play scandals in New York State history. He was the Albany-based partner lobbyist that was fined $550,000 and banned from lobbying for 5 years. I mean, an absolute, in my mind, a disqualifying event for someone who wants to be a congressman. His response has been to say, it wasn't me. And that's in spite of the fact that he's been identified in dozens and dozens of news articles by organizations like the Wall Street Journal and the Times Union have identified him as that individual. But he's just looking to run out the clock and hope that the public doesn't notice that he's a corrupt lobbyist.
You have no doubt that he did do those things?
I think that all you need to do is Google John Faso lobbying ban and make your own decision. Just go read some of the dozens and dozens of articles that identify him as that person.
He paints you as a carpetbagger, somebody who's moved from New York to the district to run for office. What's your response to that?
I mean, also fundamentally dishonest. I've lived in the district for 3 years. My business is here. My kids live here. I'm a coach. I'm a t-ball coach. I'm a soccer coach, and I'm a volunteer firefighter. I'm about to actually become an interior firefighter next week. I'm taking the exam. This is my home. I love this community, and that's part of why I'm running. And again, this is an attack, a dishonest attack from a career politician, an Albany insider. And here's a really interesting fact, too, about this, is that John Faso moved to Kinderhook in 1983. And he bragged to the New York Times when he was running for governor in 2006, he bragged to them that he moved to Kinderhook to run for the assembly. Guess how long John Faso lived in Kinderhook before he ran for the assembly?
I believe it was 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
And so now what he's doing is he's saying that I'm a carpetbagger when in fact he's the one who's the real carpetbagger. So I think what that does is it just kind of shows you who John Faso really is.
You also mentioned already, as we talked today, and in your commercials, you call him a failed politician because he lost elections.
Yes.
Does that mean that the American public should not have voted for Abraham Lincoln in 1860 or should not have voted for Ronald Reagan in 1980 because they lost elections?
Having John Faso in the same category as Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan is absurd on its face. But your point, I think, is, look, the fact is that John Faso has run for election 11 times. When he ran for controller, he lost. When he ran for governor, he lost by the largest margin in history in New York State. And then he tried to run for Congress 2 other times. I have to tell you, when I talk to people at the doors, they don't want that kind of person. They don't want office shoppers. as their representative. That's the point. People are disgusted with the system itself. So failed politician, he is a failed politician because he's run over and over again, hasn't been able to convert.
But you're not saying that in your commercial. You're not saying he's an office shopper and people don't want that anymore. I mean, it's a negative tone calling a person a failed politician. I mean, George Pataki just got crushed in presidential primary after primary. Is he now a failed politician?
Well, look, I think the issue is, people want outsiders right now because they're looking at a system that is broken. They have lost faith in this system, and they want to believe again in the system. They want to believe that the people who are running really want to try to fix this system. And when they look at someone who has spent almost 40 years in politics, who has been a serial candidate over and over and over again, that's not the kind of person that I think is going to restore that faith. That is someone who is already part of a broken political system, who is not going to fix that system. So, I think that's the main point. It's not a personal attack. It's informing the public that, look, this is someone who has run over and over again. Is that the kind of person that you're looking for to represent you, or would you like someone who's going to term limit, who's going to fight for reform in Congress, who's going to fight to make it illegal to lobby after Congress, who's going to self-term limit, and rebuild people's faith in the system?
Final question about this. If your children, one of your kids decides to run for student council, and they want to put up a poster calling their opponent a failure for some failing they had in their life, that's okay with you?
I think that, the most important thing for my kids to do if they're running for student council is to be honest and to talk about the things that they bring to the table, and also to stand up for themselves and not be a victim. If there is someone in their race who has run for student council 11 times and is backed by super PAC billionaires, that they need to fight back and they need to stand up for themselves and they need to make sure that the public knows exactly who they're running against.
So it's okay for your kid to put up a poster attacking their opponent if you feel the attack is warranted?
I think that the analogy is a little tortured, but I think that ultimately, I think the most important thing is for my children to be in the race, to fight hard, and to fight honestly.
Okay. You keep answering questions that I want to ask. So term limits was one of my next questions. You say you would term limit yourself?
Yes, I strongly believe in term limits. I think that we need more people who will self-term limit, because right now it's difficult to get that passed. But I would fight for term limits. Have already said that I will term limit myself to no more than 3 terms or 6 years.
Just like Chris Gibson.
Well, Chris actually committed to 4 terms.
Right.
Interestingly enough, has ended up committing to only 6 years. So yes, that's right.
Okay. Tell me something about yourself that might surprise people.
I think what might surprise them is that during this entire process, I've found myself in the midst of training to be an interior firefighter. I've been in Firefighter 1 for the last 12 weeks. We just had our last day of formal training yesterday, and I have to say that I questioned whether or not it was an appropriate time for me to engage in that, but it's a big time commitment. But I have to say it's something that I have gotten a great deal of joy from. It's proven to me that working to serve the people is something that it brings you joy, and I've loved it, and it's something that I'm looking forward to participating in the future.
Running into a burning building.
Well, someone's got to do it, and that's what makes firefighters incredible people, is that they put their lives at risk when other people's lives are in risk, and they do it selflessly, and they are just some of the finest people I've ever met.
Do you think we do enough to support our firefighters and our police officers?
I don't. I think that we need to. If you look at most of the volunteer programs across New York State, most of the firefighters in New York are volunteer firefighters. They really deserve a lot more credit and a lot more assistance, basically, for the wonderful work that they do.
Okay. Another personal question. Outside of your town, what's your favorite place in the district?
Boy, that's really tough to zero in on. I'd have to say that, ironically, some of my favorite places are downtown Kingston. I love the city of Hudson. Delaware out in Courtright is some of the most beautiful land I've ever seen in my life. I just think it's God's country. But I have to say that I picked Dutchess County for a reason. Dutchess County is just one of the most beautiful places I think in all of the United States. I pinch myself every time I wake up and look outside my window, and I love the people and I love the community and the 19th District. I've fallen in love with the 19th District. It's a place that I've had the privilege of traveling thousands of miles through over the last several months, met thousands of residents, and it's been a real honor to get to know them.
And a couple of more parochial issues. Fracking, where do you stand on that?
I think fracking should be controlled locally, and as a federal official, I would support that. I view the current ban in New York State as an example of local control. I would not look to interfere with that any more than I would interfere with the way that Texas sets its policies for fracking. At the same time, however, I'd like to see some greater flexibility for areas of New York State, like the Southern Tier, where there's, the economy is really in a desperate state, and fracking could be a big help. And I think that if the people of that region vote that they would like to have fracking in their area, I think they should be allowed to have it.
And there's no issue in these parts right now deemed more critical, I think, by a lot of folks than the water crisis in Hoosick Falls and in Petersburg, and now it's spreading out to other states and other communities as well. Has enough been done to help the people of those communities?
Gosh, no. I've been up to Hoosick and have met with families there that have been affected. I've been to the armory. I've been down in the basements and looked at the POET systems. I've seen the contamination. And at the time that I was there, everyone was still waiting for their water results, still waiting for their blood results. Now we know that the blood results, people are seeing levels 11 times, 50 times higher than what's healthy. The fact of the matter is that the people of Hoosick deserve answers. They deserve answers as to what happened. They deserve a clear plan for how their water is going to be clean. They're going to be provided with clean water, not just a filtration system that they've been given, which I view very much as a Band-Aid to this problem, but long term. How are we going to save this community? Right now, this community, they're not able to get mortgages. They've been redlined in terms of homeowners insurance. This community needs help. And if they're not going to get it on the state level, if I'm elected as a representative, they're going to get it from the federal level.
Chris Gibson has called for hearings, but nothing's happened. Would you want to see hearings as to how this got to where it got?
I actually called for hearings in an editorial in the Troy Record about a month before Congressman Gibson made the same appeal. I agree with him 100%, obviously, and I would absolutely call for hearings into this. We need to know what happened, and we need to know what the plan is going forward for the people of Hoosick.
You think it's wrong for the Republican leadership in the state Senate, to so far stall when it comes to hearings?
Yeah, I think it's outrageous. I think that I think they've let the people of Hoosick down. It's a small town, but I think that they have a lot of spirit. I think that there's a lot of people that are behind them that want to see answers to this. There will be answers to this problem, and it's not just Hoosick; it's also Petersburg, and it's an issue that is really it's a deeper issue. It's an infrastructure issue, and we're going to have to grapple with it.
Okay, you're down in the latest Siena poll by a sizable margin. How do you overcome that?
Well, our own internal polling shows a very different margin, but the fact of the matter is that this is a primary that there's no precedent for this kind of a primary. There's been a lot of money spent in this primary. No one really knows who's coming out to vote on June 28th. So really the only poll that really matters is the one that's going to be taken by the people of the 19th District on June 28th, and I'm confident that we will come out on top.
What do you think turnout's going to be like? Do you think that all the TV ads and your efforts are going to spur turnout? I mean, it's notoriously low for a primary, especially in June.
All I know is what I feel on the ground, door to door. And when I talk to people, I ask them if they've heard of this primary, and I ask them if they're going to vote. They tell me yes. And I think there's going to be very large participation in this primary, larger than people expect.
You want to share your numbers with us? Where do you think you stand?
I'm not going to venture. I'm not going to throw out numbers, but I think a lot more people are going to come out than people think.
Okay. And again, look into the camera and tell people why they ought to be voting for you.
Well, is the camera over here?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there's a big light here. I'm Andrew Heaney. I'm a small business owner. I'm not from politics. Grew up in a small business family. I believe that the biggest issue that we're facing today is a crisis of faith in this country because of a political system that has been broken by career politicians and lobbyists. And I believe we need to rebuild that faith. We need citizen representation to get back to Washington to fight for reforms like term limits, to fight to make it illegal to lobby after serving in Congress, to fight to take away some of the special benefits that Congress offers itself and not the American people, special medical, special pension. And I believe that only by rebuilding that faith are we going to be able to tackle the really, truly difficult problems we face, like our economy, like national security. And I hope to have your vote on June 28th.
That Wall.